If you have a question card that's not been picked up or turned in, if you'll just hold it up for a second, someone will swing by and grab it from you. But what we want to do is sort of come to the, okay, so what, now what part of this, and see where we get from here, and how do we move forward on the 4 initiatives that we were able to put into the program today. Obviously, all 50 of the issues that are on the Oregon Business Plan initiatives list are very critical, not only to Southern Oregon, but obviously to all of Oregon. In order to keep today's session within a manageable period of time and let you back to your regular full-time work responsibilities, we picked the 4 that we presented today, and I hope you found it informative and thought-provoking. So, with that, I get the opportunity to sort of pose the questions. So I'm going to start off with the question I think that probably generated out of our forest management panel. And this is actually, Commissioner, this one is specifically to you, or some environmental groups will never agree to
harvesting.
Harvesting, I apologize. Harvesting our trees off of public lands. How do you stop the appeals and the litigation process that can ultimately bring that harvest flow that was talked about?
Well, that's probably the 800-pound gorilla in the room when we're talking about these things at the on the task force. This gang of 14 that I've been drafted to participate in. That's the certainty aspect, and it's part of the principles that Wyden had outlined. I think he's got six or seven from the start, and there's a variety of different avenues to provide for that kind of certainty. One of those would be a land sale, so that you take federal lands and you put them in the private sector's hands. That's where we saw that graph where the majority of the timber comes from right now, and the reason for that is that it has to comply with the Oregon State Forest Practices Act, which is I wouldn't say that it doesn't have any environmental standards. There's ACS, which are aquatic standards, that provide for some riparian reserves, but that's just one opportunity to provide for that certainty aspect of not skirting the litigation, but kind of navigating through it, or what have you. The other one is the DeFazio-Schrader-Walden proposal, which was the trust idea, that you would kind of put a portion of those lands in management hands under a board of 7 trustees that were mandated to find some sort of harvest level that was previously agreed upon and set in legislation. So I think the premise for that is that the 1937 ONC Act that kind of dictates the management over this 2.8 million so acres of ONC land predates all of these other subsequent acts that are fairly more general. The ONC Act specifically says that these lands are dedicated to the long-term sustainable timber harvest and management, and to provide for an economy right here in our local communities. It might have been 75 years ago or even longer than that this kind of wheel got in motion with the act, but I think even then they recognized the challenge that rural communities would have if they were disconnected from the natural resources that are in our backyards. There's a couple other opportunities for certainty, but that's certainly just a couple of options. I think I said, I won't get in trouble for anything I just said. I didn't say where we're going. Those are options.
You did a very good job, Commissioner. Thank you very much. The next written question, again, I would remind you, if you have a question, if you just write it out, hold your hand up, someone will pick it up from you. This would be for our healthcare panel. So maybe Bill or Roy, if you can, still in the room, you can maybe stand up and respond to this one. Access to healthcare has 2 components. One, a financial and/or insurance, and the second is availability of healthcare providers. What is being done to train additional doctors and nurses, and is there any provision in the Healthcare Act to make this possible or to enhance the access and availability?
I think we're very fortunate in our community, both with the Providence Medical Group and now with Visante Physician Partners, along with our independent practitioners, that we have the right choices in place to be able to attract the healthcare professionals to our area. And what has changed fundamentally is the old model was you were independent, you came in, you're a physician, you generally practiced maybe in a clinic or a partnership. We know that many of the folks that are coming out with the professions and the backgrounds that we need desperately in Jackson, Joseph County are coming here with huge debts that they've incurred in being able to get those skill sets. And I think the exciting thing from my perspective is that we have a competitive, dynamic system in our communities to be able to attract those physicians. And we're actually finding, at least this year, as we brought up Asante Physician Partners, that we're starting to be able to recruit in some fantastic professions, particularly some professions that we have been trying to recruit into our community for a decade. We're now, I think, have the right combination in place. So we feel very good about that. Clearly, we know that the healthcare profession is basically a profession that requires a lot of certifications and technology expertise. And so I think that historically, you will find the medical professionals in our community have a great working relationship with Wilkes Community College, Southern Oregon University, and particularly Oregon Institute of Technology, and being able to develop the types of skill sets we need for our community. But we, again, need to always pay attention to that because, again, those professionals are being recruited on a national and global basis. Roy, did I hit it?
The only thing I would add is, can't speak for the physician level, but as part of one of the work groups we have for the Workforce Board, we have a healthcare sector work group. Great Ann Richmond Asante is the chair of that. We have other folks in the room, Phil Holstein and Brent Cal from Valley Media Care. We have a range from long-term care to assisted care, and we're really focusing on everything kind of below that. It's nursing, on down, occupational therapists, CNAs. So we have a nursing workforce that's been convening around that to try and address those issues. We know that these are structural and challenging issues. I mean, they were that way before the recession. They're going to catch up again as we come out of the recession, as the baby boomers age, and there are limited capacities at RCC or OHSU's SOU facility for our region. And the other thing I would say about it is the other conversation, and Greg can talk to this as well as others. People are very cognizant the healthcare industry is changing, so the positions and the capacities are going to change. And we had just a conversation around the need for community healthcare workers. And so we actually facilitated a conversation with the community care organizations and started, RCC turned it right around, hooking us up, some of us with the Stacy and the Power Up Academy, to really turn that around right away. We've had that training within, we're the first in the state to have it actually. The state's looking to us for a model. So those are ways we're trying to be responsive to that.
Thanks, Jim, very much. Any other questions? Then I'm going to, Representative Buckley and Representative Richardson, the opening initiatives presented by Duncan and others this morning were reform PERS, if I can get this correct, invest wisely in education, and build a bridge. That's probably both the bridge to Vancouver, but it's also the bridge to some of the solutions. Would each of you like to comment on those three specifically, or any of the other initiatives that you heard about today in the presentation?
Since I'm older than Dennis, I'll go first. I give a lot of credit to the Oregon Business Plan, the efforts that have been made. We are moving in the right direction in many ways. The recession, I would not wish this recession on our state or our country. It's been so painful. But what it has given us is a sense of urgency to make changes and make transformational changes, and that's been discussed today in healthcare, in education, and in public safety, which hasn't been talked about much today. We also have to make a transformational change in how we handle public safety, move it back into the community, have more community-oriented programs that has to be done. In terms of the major initiatives brought forth by the business plan this year, I believe they're the right ones, and I believe we'll be working for them. I would ask us to look at not only transforming or fixing PERS, but to do it in the way that the governor's framed it, to with respect to public employees. My frame for this is my next door neighbor, who was a high school teacher for over 30 years in Jackson County. And when I spoke to him about this, he's a Tier 1 retiree, and I asked him, I said, what do you think of the governor's proposal? And he said, I'm open to it. I'm definitely open to it. He has a decent retirement. He gets to go see his grandkids. He gets to travel. He has one grandkid in Georgia. He gets to travel to Georgia to see his grandkid. He gets to have a decent, comfortable retirement, decent health care, and he's willing to adjust his COLA on that to help contribute. He wants it to mean something though. He wants his grandkids in Oregon to have more teachers in their schools instead of laying off more teachers in their schools. He wants it to mean that we actually are going to be moving forward together as a state. So I think there's definite room on the PERS reform, but I think it requires all of us to step up a little bit further and say, it's not just my next door neighbor who has to give a little bit more. We all have to give a little bit more as citizens and transform the way that we look at citizenship. Investing more wisely in education, absolutely. We're passionate about it, it's bipartisan. There's no question about that. But I would again bring it back to, I think one of the things we're not talking about, we laid off 7,000 teachers in Oregon the last 3 years, 7,000. We have to start rebuilding our personnel. Duncan and I are both passionate about proficiency-based education, and we're asking our schools to make that transformation to get out of seat time and get towards proficiency-based and outcome-based education. We have to give them, make sure they have stable resources to do that and have the personnel to do that. I would like to see our state hire 2,000 more teachers in the next 2 years as we invest more wisely in education. And building a bridge, yes, not only metaphorically building the bridge, all the work in education. I thought our education panel did a great job of talking about that. But building an actual bridge, Columbia River Crossing, I think it actually has to get done. And we have to do it in a way that is affordable, that's fair, but also make sure that we do have the resources for transportation projects throughout the rest of the state as well.
This discussion today has been extremely valuable in pointing out the problems that we're facing and the consequences of failing to act. We have not addressed the difficulty in actually implementing the changes that we all know need to be done. Since 2005, the budgets for social services and healthcare for state has gone up 44%. The K-12 budgets from general fund have gone up 7.5%. Bill mentioned that Oregon Health Authority is looking at an $8 billion budget in the next session, or next 2 years. That is a 20% increase in the budget for the current biennium. Education is set to go up 7.5%. In 2014, next year, the current plan is to add 225,000 of the 600,000 uninsured, add 250,000 to the current Oregon Health Plan. The cost on that is about $1.5 billion, but the federal government says, oh, don't worry, we will pay that until 2016. In other words, it's a drug of choice that's hooked for 2 years, and then the state will have to assume that. We don't get there from here, you see? The cost of PERS in the next 2 years is going to be $4 billion. That includes about $330 million of just the cost of the service, the debt, on the pension obligation bonds that we've borrowed so far. It also, the $16 billion of unfunded actuarial liability assumes that starting immediately we will have an 8% return on the $56 billion PERS fund in an annual yield, compounded. Well, that's not happening. And so the $16 billion unfunded actuarial liability is actually much higher than that because the assumptions give you a false figure, because we're not getting 8% return compounded annually on our PERS, the PERS fund. The list goes on, and so what you have is talk about transforming medicine and healthcare, but it's not going to lower the cost. The goal is to lower the amount of increase. And when we're trying to get from 6% annual increase to 4%, that is the federal match portion. But even whatever we do, there's a state match that keeps going up. And so the cost for medical care and for health care continues on a trajectory which will keep down the amount of money that could be allocated to provide a better education. The PERS reforms, the governor has proposed in his budget, to balance his budget, $865 million of the balance, the revenue is going to come from savings from PERS. The public sector unions may not be real happy about an $810 million reduction from the COLAs that are currently being paid and will be expected to be paid in the future. And so to balance your budget based on $865 million of money that is subject to challenge by the courts, and when you have a Democrat-controlled House, Senate, and Governor's office whose #1 supporter is the public sector unions, that may be a kind of a hard carry to pass meaningful reform. And so we do need to fix PERS and not just tinker with it. And we do need to transform education, but actually doing those things in the current political atmosphere in this state, to say it's going to be very difficult is an understatement.
Are there any other? Let's stop the card thing, because I think it's more important that we get some questions. So, if there's somebody out there who has a question and would like to stand up and
we talked about the bridges a bit, and just a bit, but I was wondering, Commissioner Lohman, to talk about the importance of the CRC to Southern Oregon, because Duncan and Jay and Jeremy are here to talk about what's important to Southern Oregon. And I think there are many who really don't understand and may say, well, gee, this is Portland, it's Vancouver, it's Willamette Valley, why should we care? I know the Medford Chamber is one of the first ones to come on board supporting the CRC. So, Duncan, I mean, Dave, would you talk about that? Why is it important to us down here in Southern Oregon?
I just want to note that Commissioner Skundrich is using a very good technique to avoid answering questions himself.
called you out that time, Commissioner.
I use another technique to not to avoid answering this question, but I'd like to just quote Mike Card with Combined Transport, who runs a very significant company down here that carries goods nationwide. And I've heard him say that the single most important thing that Oregon can do for the transportation system is fix the bridge across the Columbia River. Because he's got truckers that, because of delays in the Portland area, have to take their required rest breaks instead of being able to keep going. And it changes his whole structure and the way he's got to manage his company, and it slows down getting goods to market. Getting goods to market is, as you heard this morning from J&P, that's getting goods to market in a timely fashion is critical to economic success. We've got a lot of companies here in this valley for whom getting goods to market over that Columbia River is a critical part of their success. So it's very important to the Portland area, but it's very important to the whole state as well.
Thank you very much. Any other questions you'd like to pose? Who else would you like to put on the spot? That's right. Any other questions for our group up here? Come on, there must be something that you heard that you'd like to question them once more.
Why don't you let the panelists just reflect on it?
Yeah, okay, all right. So Doug, I'm going to start with, so I'm going to go back to Duncan. Duncan, I think, you know, this is the first of these sort of, after the summit, what do you do to bring this home to communities within the state of Oregon? What could we be doing next to help support all of the initiatives and the general business plan as presented?
Well, first, let me thank you, and just coming down here, I always get excited, and just if you were an investment opportunity, I would be piling a lot of money into you right now. I mean, this was an amazing morning, and it just always, I come away realizing what a remarkable opportunity Southern Oregon has. I mean, despite all the forestry issues you've dealt with over the last 20 years, the economy's done, you've diversified. I think forestry could come back with intelligent management of federal forests. I really do. I think I'm more hopeful about that opportunity than I have been in many, many years, thanks to a lot of the collaboration we're seeing down here. So I think the potential for the economy to grow is really significant. And then the collaboratives, both the healthcare and the education, those were extraordinary panels. And frankly, you've got what they were the co-chairs of the most important committee. It's a little different now, but they still continue to be the leaders, and they are the the most respected members of the House. And the funding streams that they provide for the communities in both education and healthcare are really, really important. And these guys are redesigning the way the state invests in both healthcare and education and public safety. And all of that, I think, given the kind of collaboration you have here, creates extraordinary potential for improving the education workforce system, improving the healthcare system, transforming them, I guess is a better word, to get better delivery, which will really affect the economy. So what can you do? I would say keep doing what you're doing locally. Make sure these folks and others in your delegation are hearing it. But I think even more importantly, I mean, the Education Collaborative is a model, I think, for the state. I think the healthcare is a model for the state. I think in forestry, that work is really, really important. And then on transportation, Dave, and sitting as one of 5 members of the Transportation Commission, has a really great perspective. And as he said, you're part of a larger transportation infrastructure. We need to communicate that really widely and make sure we're getting the transportation infrastructure we need. And as you grow in transportation, I think that is a self-fulfilling system in terms of the air service and rail service. As you grow your economy, you get more volume, and that creates more opportunity for access to other places. So again, I would invest in Southern Oregon if I could as a stock. It's a great place. And you're a model for the state.
We may have an opportunity for you to do that.
Thanks.
So Commissioner, you've asked the question. Can you reflect on what we covered this morning?
Well, one thing, Steven's down here runs the Angel Network in our area, Duncan, so you can see him for a little date. And again, thank you for coming down, bringing your team down. I was at that first one 10 years ago at Harry and David, when we talked about the issues. I remember the hot topic at that time was substance abuse and finding employees. But thank you for being down here. And again, thank you. And also for your comments about collaboration in Southern Oregon, we have reinvented ourselves somewhat down here. We've had to struggle with natural resources. It's still very important. It's not the final panacea to our economic woes in Southern Oregon, but it's certainly a major part of getting. So as our lobbyists and such work on that, we realize it's a national issue, but it's absolutely imperative that we have the governor's support. And I appreciate him meeting with Senator Wyden and trying to work together, and appreciate him forming the Gang of 14 and such, looking at this to try to get something done. But with that said, we want folks in the north to know that things really are happening here in Southern Oregon. We have an incredible micro, if you will, industry and manufacturing. We have some tremendous technical and technology companies here that kind of fly under the radar. There are things being done in Southern Oregon outside of the timber issue. And so we want people to understand that. We want opportunities, so taking a look at regulatory issues. Taxing is an issue too, but it's not the biggest issue, but it's a big issue. But regulations is huge. And to take a look, and so Oregon people recognize, and Jay here probably speak that much better than I can, that this is a good place to do business here in Southern Oregon. It's not just a catchphrase, we're open for business, but we really wanted to grow business here in Southern Oregon. And then we think we have a lot to offer here. We wish we got a little more, I won't say notoriety, because that's not necessarily always the best part, but acknowledgement. And but I think we get that with people like Bill, who's represented, and Dave, and such statewide. Of course, these 2 representatives. So with that, I just want to say that for the folks that are here, the economy, you're all part of that economic recovery. So everything that you do, I salute you. For you employers out there in the audience, thank you for running a business and having to sign a check every day, or every week, or every month, or if you do it, thank you very much. And we're working, in the public sector. I think I won't put words in Commissioner Hare's mouth, but we're working to try to make it, to do everything we can from the public sector to help you prosper. Because if you prosper, you're going to hire people. Those people are going to draw wages. And they're going to buy goods and services in this area. So thank you very much for that.
Commissioner Hare, you didn't get to ask the audience a question. Maybe this is an opportunity for that.
Well, I was in the back of the room for most of the presentation, trying to multitask, hear what people were saying, because I think it was really important. We have a series of good presentations that happened this morning, and people taking a little bit of time out of their, I don't know that we talk enough about this, but I think we're doing a good job here in Southern Oregon of bringing these issues to light. We have to continue to do that. I think I had a campaign slogan just a couple of years ago that if you're not at the table, then you're on the menu. And in Josephine County and Southern Oregon, Jackson County working collaboratively together, I think Commissioner Skundrich highlighted that. We want to be at the table. We are at the table. And so I think we're going to push, we're going to lean hard into these challenges into the future and be part of the solution as opposed to part of the problem. One of those is that just want to thank the governor for appointing this task force. I don't know about appointing me, but having a task force in general, and also this pilot project within Executive Order 1207 to take a look at some of the land use planning rules that we have going on in the state of Oregon and what doesn't work for some of these rural economies. And it's very early in the stages. Jackson County, Douglas County, and Josephine County are working on that, and I think it's going to be a big deal for maybe setting a precedent within the rest of the state about how we can intelligently manage the growth of our areas and not be an impediment to the economic development when it needs to happen in particular areas where it wants to happen. Appreciate Skundrich for working on that infrastructure investment board and what he does on that. I think we're all one big team here. If we're pulling in the same direction, I think we have a much better chance of not only surviving but thriving in these challenging times. We're going to come out of it stronger and more resilient for the future. But always going back to that natural resource aspect of being a real foundation. We've got to get that taken care of. And I may be young, but I'm not ignorant to the idea that people have been working on this for 25 years. The time is now. We've got to get our head around it and get some state and federal help to move the ball over the goal line. So thank you to everybody who came so already and Regional Solutions for hosting us.
Well, before we give a round of applause to our elected officials, Duncan, I want to call your attention to the last item that's on the agenda here, because you wanted to invest in our community, and I'm going to give you an opportunity to learn more about it. Sorry is hosting its 10th annual Southern Oregon Business Conference on January the 24th. And you're going to get a chance to hear from four business representatives, not talking about their businesses, but talking about the sector that they represent. Internet commerce, you've heard some of that this morning on the transportation issue. Craig Johnson, the CEO of Harry David, is going to speak on that topic. One of Tolga's contemporaries in especially high-tech electronics, Jim Hendershot from Radio Design Group, is going to talk on that industry. We also have Mark Rudolph from Amy's Kitchen, one of our large specialty food manufacturers. And we also have John Murphy Sr. Representing the wood products. They're going to talk about the sector and how the growth is there. And then the last item, we've invited back a site consultant who visited us last September, last New Year, and he's going to come and give a larger audience a perspective on what he saw, what he learned, and how he thinks we can be more effective in representing ourselves as that very special region that you. So I got one of those little cube things to put on my phone. I could take your credit card registration right here this morning, and we'll have you lined up. So that's a place that you can invest in Southern Oregon. So please join me in thanking our officials. And thank you for